on here very quickly because I've just received a query, an email query from one of my MSc students. It's about cognitive distortions and negative automatic thoughts, and it's about kind of what the difference is between them. And I thought that this might be something that you, the aspiring clinical psychologist community, might be interested in hearing about. So this live is all about kind of just very quickly talking about the differences between negative automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions. So the email that I received from my student reads, negative automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions are covered, but not exactly sure what the difference is. As far as I understand, negative automatic thoughts are intrusive thoughts that all humans have, but in depressed individuals, these negative automatic thoughts stem from cognitive distortions. Is this the correct interpretation? Very good question. If so, is this suggesting that non-depressed people do not have these cognitive distortions, or that the distortions have a weaker influence, so their negative automatic thoughts are less likely to lead to self-feeding negative cognitive triads? So that's the question, asking, you know, what the difference is between what the difference is between negative automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions, and also, in a way, how they're related. So, you know, really important question. And what I thought was helpful for this particular student is to explain what each of them was, to provide an example, and to have a little bit at the end where I talk about how they interact with each other. So I'm just going to lay that out for you who are in this talk now. Hi, Timmy. Hi, Princess. So, psychology in the building or in the car? Indeed. Here we go. So, negative automatic thoughts are essentially a type of thought. So we all have thoughts that are constantly running through our minds. Whether or not we're paying attention to them is another question, but we all have kind of a running commentary that's happening in our mind. And negative automatic thoughts are the kind of thoughts that make us feel some kind of way, like they make us feel negative, as is suggested in the title. So they're thoughts that might make us feel sad, or might make us feel anxious or worried. They're thoughts that kind of prompt those feelings. What we know about thinking and thoughts is that when we think, we trigger certain neurons in our brains, and it's almost like we're experiencing the things that we're thinking, and as a trajectory that then impacts on how we're feeling. So in terms of our neurons, that will then trigger a response in our limbic system, which is where our emotions kind of are regulated and originate from. And so we have, as a result of our thoughts, we have certain feelings that are prompted by our brains and triggered by our brains, and set off a physiological response in addition to the thinking that we're doing. So, you know, a negative automatic thought is a thought that enters our brains. They're often, you know, just spontaneous, at least initially, and they can trigger a sort of reaction or a response in our brain based on how pervasive or how big that negative automatic thought is. An example of a negative automatic thought could be something like, nobody likes me. So the thought, nobody likes me, might enter someone's brain and might lead them to feel sad if they are feeling lonely, for example, or might lead them to feel anxious if they're around lots of people that they feel don't like them, etc., etc. So that's a negative automatic thought, a thought that comes into your mind. Often it can be spontaneous. It spontaneously comes into your mind, and then we then interpret that thought, or then we have kind of a response to that thought, and that can be an emotion. It can also be a behavior, and physical sensations as well, based on kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, and how we understand those thoughts and how we interpret those thoughts. So that's a negative automatic thought. A cognitive distortion is more of a pattern of thinking. So it's kind of like how we understand and interpret our surroundings based on our values, based on our assumptions, based on our past experiences. So a cognitive distortion isn't a thought in and of itself. It's kind of a way of understanding the world around us and interpreting the world around us, which is biased based on our past experience. And it's fine to have them. We all have them. In fact, the brain craves them because we want to understand our world, and the world is a very complicated place. And so in order to simplify the world, the brain naturally wants to try and find kind of ways, knowledge packets, ways of packaging information so that we can understand what's going on around us. So, you know, a typical example is I was talking to somebody recently, and somebody introduced the person as a YouTuber, and we were out eating, and, you know, that preconception of what a YouTuber is meant that knowledge packet, we didn't need to unpack what was going to happen. If you know what a YouTuber is, you know they're probably going to pull out a video, or a camera, sorry. They're probably going to put it on YouTube and publish the information, you know, and all of these things that we know go with recording a YouTube video. It's our brain knowing what a YouTuber is. It's our brain kind of putting together our previous experience of what a YouTuber does, and then making decisions and basing, you know, what we do next off of that information. So we all have ways of understanding the world and simplifying the world, and these are called schemas. Cognitive distortions are kind of like schemas. They're a very similar thing, in that they are knowledge packets and ways of understanding the world, but they are usually negative, or they usually lead to negative thoughts or negative ways of understanding the world. So they can impact our feelings negatively, essentially. You know, a pervasive cognitive distortion can really impact on how we see the world, and can lead us to filter things in a really inaccurate way, and in a way that's kind of inaccurate and negative. So it can make our worlds feel smaller and more threatening, and just a more difficult place to be. So an example of a cognitive distortion is black and white thinking. It can also it's also known as all or nothing thinking, and this is when somebody looks at life in terms of polarized categories. So we're either good or bad. We've either, you know, failed or we've succeeded. You know, there's no kind of in-betweens with these polarized all or nothing kind of ways of thinking, and so if something isn't perfect, it could lead someone to feel as though they have done really, really badly, and this is kind of a cognitive distortion that can affect the way that people think, and that brings me on to comparing the two. So cognitive distortions can cause people to, I guess, understand their surroundings in very particular ways, and those particular ways are negative and can impact on people's feelings negatively, so and also lead people to have particular kinds of thoughts, i.e. negative automatic thoughts. So if you took an example where, for example, you saw someone on the opposite side of the road and they're walking towards you, and you're thinking, oh, I don't know whether to say hi to them or not, that person might pass you and not say anything. And if you had the cognitive distortion of mind reading, for example, you might assume that that person doesn't like you, or that that person, what that person is thinking, or why that person hasn't said anything. And that cognitive distortion of being a mind reader might lead you to have the negative automatic thought that everybody thinks I'm a loser, that person thinks I'm a loser, everybody thinks I'm a loser. And the more frequent those experiences happen, where those cognitive distortions are matched with those negative automatic thoughts, the more pervasive that cognitive distortion can become. So the more likely people are to use that cognitive distortion to understand the world around them, and then lead on to more negative automatic thoughts, which leads into, again, more negative feelings, and the cycle kind of continues, leads people to do things that are perhaps less, sorry, I'm getting a call, that are less putting themselves out there, or less challenging of those cognitive distortions or negative automatic thoughts, and the cycle keeps going around. So yeah, the more people have these cognitive distortions or experience these cognitive distortions and they're not being challenged, the more people will have these negative automatic thoughts, the more it will feed into future interpretations of the world around them, and might lead to a mental health difficulty such as depression or anxiety. And this is kind of in the this is a cognitive framework that I'm talking about. So in terms of kind of, going back to that example, an alternative way of thinking about, that person passing you on the street could be that they were so engrossed in what they were doing or thinking that they didn't even see you. That cognitive distortion of mind reading, that they don't like you, nobody likes me, or that you know what's happening in people's head and that they don't like you, that could be incorrect. And that is the core thing about cognitive distortions. They are usually based on information that is inaccurate, or they are in terms of, so they are presented, we present them to ourselves in terms of absolutes as though they're always correct, when actually there are different ways of thinking about all situations, and cognitive distortions don't allow us to do that. So in terms of being able to use cognitive theory and cognitive therapy to kind of help people to overcome mental health difficulties, what we can do, and this is how we use cognitive theory in therapy, is that we try to understand what people's negative automatic thoughts are. Then we think about what kind of cognitive distortions people are employing that might lead them to have those negative automatic thoughts. And what we want to do is we want to expose people to alternative ways of thinking, to try and challenge that the cognitive distortion that they are using to understand the world is inaccurate. It's not always correct. There are alternative ways of thinking, and it's about trying to encourage people to use those alternative ways of thinking to, balance thoughts, negative automatic thoughts, with maybe more kind of neutral thoughts or even positive thoughts, to balance those thoughts and give people the opportunity to feel what it's like to have those automatic thoughts, those alternative thoughts that are more positive or more neutral. And the idea is that over time, as people practice balancing thoughts, the negative automatic thoughts become less large, less pervasive, and less difficult to manage, because people are experiencing something alternative, and those thoughts something alternative, but they're also given the opportunity to and the power to say, I have a choice over what I'm thinking and what I believe. That's how we think. That's kind of an explanation of negative automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions, and how they impact us and can lead to mental health difficulties, but also how we as psychologists use that theory and to try and kind of alleviate mental health difficulties, so to try and interfere with negative automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions, and to show people that we can think differently, and that is an option that we have. And actually the negative automatic thoughts aren't always rooting for us, they aren't always right. So I hope that people found that helpful, and let me know in the comments if you have. And I come across lots of questions like this, particularly with my MSc students, and so if people would like me to kind of just hop on here and kind of give just a bit of a rundown more often, I'm very happy to do that. But yeah, it's kind of whether people would like that. So just let me know if people would like that, and if there are any topics that people are particularly interested in as well. I'm always open to listening and trying to incorporate what I can, what people will find the most helpful. So let me know if there is anything that you would like me to talk about, and I would be happy to do that. Hello, Sewell Being. Thank you for being here. And there were no questions up above, so I don't need to address those. Thank you to those of you who are here, and for watching, those of you who have watched this afterwards. And yeah, get in touch if you would like to know anything else about clinical psychology. I'd be happy to help. Take care, have a wonderful day, or bye. end now.